Dr. Robert White was a neurosurgeon at the Cleveland Medical Hospital in Ohio. In 1963, he performed the first experiment to keep a brain alive outside the body.
See here, when you take the brain out and isolate it, and you keep it alive and live forever. There have been many attempts throughout the world, particularly in the old Soviet Union, to take the brain out of an animal, they like the dog, for example, and keep it alive with machinery. Now, you can do that with the heart, the kidney, the liver, the lung, all the other body organs, solid organs. But nobody had ever been able to do it with the brain. And part of the reason is we must remember the brain is very delicate when it comes to its blood supply. And so when we finally did it and found that this brain of a highly developed animal had brain waves, had biochemistry, was functioning just as it would. Now, we couldn't talk to it, we could send it electrical signals, we could show that it could actually hear and so forth, but we didn't know whether it was processing the information. But the point of it all is that that moment in time also said to us, if you can do it for the animal brain, you could do it for the human brain. This incredibly brilliant scientist, Stephen Hawking, who's an astrophysicist actually, he is now in a wheelchair and literally speaks via a computer. And some people, perhaps unkindly, have described this wonderful man as sort of a head on a computer, basically. But he would be somebody who potentially could survive his diseased body through a total body transplant.
To prove that the brain was in fact functioning normally while in this state, Dr. White needed to undertake a second experiment, during which he succeeded in transplanting the head of a monkey onto the body of another. The creature survived for 7 days before the body rejected the head.
In the monkey experiments, these animals are as much a monkey as they were when they were in their own original body. So I would presume, and I'd go beyond that, I would be assured that the monkey personality is retained. So consciousness can be transplanted. Obviously, personality, when I speak of the monkey having personality, can be transferred. And so you might ask, where did this bring us as far as the human spirit or soul goes? And I guess you could argue it can be transplanted.
One of my main research interests is whole brain emulation. We can simulate the nerve cells, the signals going on inside them, how one signal goes from one neuron to another, and that way we can learn a lot of interesting things about the brain. But what about making a simulation that encompasses all the nerve cells in the brain, all the little chemical and electric activities that are happening? That might actually become an emulation, something that is so accurate that it is the same thing. So a neural impulse in my brain, that is of course a biochemical process, but we could imagine in a computer a piece of software calculating that now this much energy must move to that area, those areas will have these levels of chemicals change. So all the processes in the real biological brain would have counterparts in the software. They might be very different from what's actually happening in a real brain, but they have exactly the same function. So the idea of the brain scanning would be to start with the brain, fixate it using various chemical techniques, slice it up thinly, scan each of these slices using advanced microscopy, reconstruct in a computer the three-dimensional structure where everything is and what it is, and then use various mathematical methods to turn that into a computer simulation of what would be going on in the brain. I believe that an uploaded person would actually be a person with consciousness, emotions, and we should give them human rights and treat them as real people. Suppose we have a brain emulation. We have a piece of software that does exactly the same work as a real human brain. That human brain is of course going to be a person with skills, knowledge, emotions, at least if it's a successful emulation. And suppose it was a good mathematician or a lawyer or a storyteller, well, a copy of that brain could do the same work. You could ask the mathematician brain a mathematical problem, and it would be able to solve it as well as the original mathematician. Now, you could imagine, of course, having a lot of copies of brains around, which would allow a lot of problems to be solved. The problem I immediately recognize is, of course, that these copies would also come up with ideas. Oh, I want to do that extra product, but I'm just a single copy. Let's make an extra one.
I am Natasha Vita-Moore, and I work with the field of human enhancement. I currently live in the United States, although I consider myself a global citizen. It's a very complicated process to consider what it might be like to upload the mind into a different type of system outside the body and outside the housing of the brain. But it's a tremendously wonderful field in that it pushes the limits of what we think we are and what we think we can become. So it's a wide open field of possibilities for not only each individual but for civilization. I would like to see what the world is like and be part of a species that has pretty much removed death, not as a necessity, but as a conclusion. It's a foregone conclusion. We are going to die. And I think it'd be fascinating to see what it would be like if that foregone conclusion was no longer foregone. There are many different worldviews, many different religious or philosophical belief systems that say don't tamper with that. Humans are supposed to die. We're supposed to age and grow old and die and make way for the young. That's the process. That's the give and take of the seasons, the changing of the seasons. Well, I don't agree with that at all. I think that's old wives' tale. I think it's a myth. And it's like the myth of flying too high, Icarus, who flew too high to the sun and his wings melted and he fell down to the earth.
The military has been doing further projects besides just this. DARPA has the Avatar program, and that's a mind transfer technology that they have. And one of the people that's involved with this research is Dmitry Itskov, and he's head of what's called the 2045 Initiative, and that group is working, and they say that by 2045 they will have the ability to download consciousness into a computer. Now, what I'm going to suggest to you is because over the many years that I've been researching the Illuminati, I keep coming across the proof that they're probably 30 years at least ahead of us in the technology that we know, and maybe even more. So I'm going to suggest, if he's saying that we can do this in 45 years, I'm going to suggest that they're already able to do it. So he's working hard to make the body to be an accessory. What do I mean by that? It means your mind can be downloaded somewhere. They give you a new body. They download that consciousness in there. And then when that body wears out, they download your consciousness to the new body. The neurosurgeon who wrote that bestseller that's out there now, Proofs of Heaven, who had the near-death experience, when I read it, he mentioned the book, Irreducible Mind, which that book that came out in 2007 shows scientific evidence that the consciousness can be indeed separated from the body. So this isn't something theoretical, but they've proven that the consciousness can be separated from the body. And I'm going to give you some highlights that I had time-wise on cloning, because most of us haven't really been following it closely. In 1952, they announced that they had cloned a frog. Right? In 1970, Lord Rothschild, he recommended that the United Nations have an agency to license and control human cloning. And in 1977 was the first public announcement of someone being cloned, someone who was very wealthy, but they kept the name of this person secret. And then in 81 they announced mice had been cloned. And then in 97 they again announced that humans had been cloned. And then in 2002, they said 100 people had been cloned. Technically, to clone a person is no more complicated than it is to clone a cow or a pig. There's a few little differences in the steps, the procedures, but as far as complications, it's just as easy. And I'm going to suggest to you that the Illuminati not only have the motive to clone and to transfer consciousness, but they have the means. And if they have the motive and means, what's that mean? It means that they're doing it.